Hello, and welcome back to Cursed Lullabies. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered like cursed lullabies, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. Until a week ago, I worked as an usher at a huge old movie theater downtown. It wasn't one of those modern places with recliner seats and full meals and bright, clean hallways. This building was the opposite. It had stained, sticky carpet that never really looked dry, even when it was. The neon signs outside flickered like they were about to give up. Inside, the corridors were long and narrow and seemed to stretch farther than they should, especially on the upper floors where the lights were dimmer and the air always felt a little colder. Because it was an independent theater, we showed a lot of movies the big chains didn't bother with. Classic movies, small indie films, weird foreign stuff. And late at night, we had this tradition of playing the cheapest horror movies we could get our hands on. The kind of movies you could tell were made with almost no money. Lots of practical gore, buckets of fake blood, rubber body parts, bad acting, bad sound, bad everything. They were so over the top that most people watched them to laugh, but once in a while you'd get someone who looked like they were taking it seriously. We had one screen dedicated to those late-night horror shows. It was the smallest auditorium in the entire building, tucked at the very end of the longest hallway on the second floor. That hall was already creepy even when it was busy, because it had too many turns and too many doors that didn't go anywhere. At night, it was worse. Most of the other screens were on the first level, so the second floor could feel deserted. The horror auditorium was at the farthest point, like someone had designed it on purpose so you'd have to walk away from everyone else to get there. My job was easy on paper. I stood near the ticket podium or the hall entrance, pointed people toward their screen numbers, answered basic questions, and then cleaned up after showings. When a movie ended, I'd go in with a broom and a trash bag and sweep up the popcorn and cups and candy wrappers. It wasn't glamorous. It was mostly boring. But it was quiet work, and I liked the routine. I liked knowing what would happen next. 3 months ago, that routine broke. It started on a Thursday night, around 11. That was our last showing. By that time, the theater felt different. The crowds were gone. The lobby music had been turned down. The concession lights were mostly off. Even the smell changed, from hot butter and sugar to stale carpet and cleaning chemicals. A man walked up to the box office. There was nothing special about him. He wasn't tall or scary-looking or dressed like a villain in a movie. Average height, average build. Plain dark jacket. Plain face. The kind of face your brain slides right off of the moment you look away, like it can't find anything worth storing. If you passed him on the street, you'd forget him before you reached the next block. He had a girl with him. She stood slightly behind him like she didn't want to be noticed. She wore a bright yellow coat that looked almost too cheerful in the dim lobby. Her hair was messy, like she'd been sleeping badly. The strangest thing was how quiet she was. She didn't talk to him, didn't look around, didn't check her phone. She just stared down at the carpet's loud pattern, like she was trying to read it. The man asked for tickets to the late-night horror show in the small auditorium at the end of the second-floor hall. That night's movie was a notorious B-movie about a cannibal family. It was the kind of film people dared each other to watch. The effects were graphic and sloppy, the story was gross, and the acting was so bad it almost felt like a joke. Nobody had bought a ticket for it all week. Not one. The cashier told him the price for 2 tickets. The man shook his head. Then He pulled out a thick roll of cash and set it on the counter. He didn't count it out slowly. He just placed it there like he didn't care how much it was. "I want every ticket," he said, calm as if he was ordering popcorn. "Buy out the whole room." The cashier blinked, confused. The manager came over, asked what was going on, saw the money, and approved it immediately. That's how it works in places like that. The theater was struggling. Any extra cash was a blessing. The man was handed a long strip of tickets. He didn't look at them. He just took them and walked toward the hall leading to the second floor. The girl followed him without speaking, like she was attached by an invisible rope. I was standing near the entrance to that hallway, doing my usual thing, keeping an eye on the late-night crowd. I watched them walk away. The hallway swallowed them. They kept going until they reached the heavy wooden doors of the small horror auditorium, and then they disappeared inside. Part of my job was doing theater checks. Every 45 minutes, I had to walk into each active screen, stand at the back for a minute, and make sure nobody was recording the movie, smoking, or causing trouble. Most of the time, it was pointless. People were just watching films. But management insisted, so we did it. After 45 minutes passed, I walked up to the second floor. The hallway was quiet and too long, and the carpet muffled my footsteps, which somehow made it worse. I reached the final doors and opened one just a crack so light from the hall wouldn't spill inside. The screen flashed bright, violent colors. The sound was loud, wet, and ugly. On screen, someone was screaming while someone else did something that looked like drawn-out surgical torture. It was disgusting, even by our late-night standards. I looked down at the seats. Out of about 50 seats, only 2 were occupied. The man and the girl sat in the middle row, right in the center, like they'd picked the exact middle on purpose. They didn't lean toward each other. They didn't react to the gore. They just sat stiff and still, staring straight ahead. I closed the door and went back to the lobby. At the time, it just seemed like a weird couple with weird taste. An hour later, the movie ended. Credits rolled. The sound faded. My shift was almost over. I grabbed my broom and trash bag and stood near the hallway exit, waiting for them to come out so I could clean the auditorium and lock up. The doors at the end of the hall opened. The man stepped out alone. He adjusted his jacket like it was cold, walked past me without looking at me, and headed straight for the main exit. No goodbye, no goodnight. Nothing. I waited for the girl in the yellow coat to come out behind him. A few seconds passed, then a full minute, then 2 minutes. Nothing. I assumed she went to the restroom. People do that after movies. So I walked down the hall and pushed into the small auditorium, expecting to find her in there, gathering her coat, or standing up slowly, or looking around. The lights were up. The screen was blank. The theater was completely empty. Not empty, except for someone in the back. Empty. Every seat vacant. No movement. No sound besides the projector cooling down and the faint hum of the building. I walked down the aisles anyway, checking. I even looked behind the last row, where people sometimes hide if they're messing around. Nothing. I stepped back into the hallway and checked the small restroom near those doors. Empty. Then I looked at the emergency exit at the front of the auditorium. It was firmly closed, the crash bar untouched. If someone opened that door, a loud alarm would scream through the whole building. That alarm worked. Everyone knew it worked because it had gone off before when a drunk guy tried to sneak out. The alarm hadn't sounded. I stood there, holding my broom, trying to solve it like a simple puzzle. Maybe she left while I was distracted. Maybe she slipped past me while I looked down at my phone. Maybe she had gone ahead of him and I didn't notice. So I shrugged it off, because that's what you do when something doesn't make sense and you're tired and you want to go home. I swept the floor, locked the doors, and left. The next Thursday night, at the exact same time, he came back. Same dark jacket, same average face, different girl. This time she had dark curly hair and wore a heavy sweater. She looked tired in the same way the first girl had looked tired, like she was running on low battery. She didn't speak either. She didn't smile. She didn't even look like she wanted to be there. Once again, the man pulled out a roll of cash. Once again, he bought every ticket for the late-night horror show in that small auditorium. Different movie, same style, low budget, graphic, full of screaming and stabbing and fake guts. They walked down the hall. 45 minutes later, I did my check. They were sitting in the exact same seats, the center of the middle row, staring blankly at the screen like they were watching the weather. When the movie ended, the man walked out alone. I went into the auditorium immediately this time, like I could catch the trick in the act. It was empty again. No girl, no sign of her. Emergency exit sealed. Bathroom empty. No other doors, no other hallways, nowhere to go. That was the moment I felt real fear start to creep in, because it wasn't one strange night anymore. It was a pattern, and the pattern continued, every single Thursday, for 3 months. It became so regular that I started to dread Thursdays. I'd be fine all week, and then Thursday evening would come, and I'd feel my stomach knot up as if my body knew what was coming. Every Thursday at 11, he arrived. Every Thursday, he brought a completely different girl. Sometimes tall, sometimes short. Different clothes, different hair. But the same tired, blank look in the eyes. The same silence. They never spoke in the lobby. They never acted like a couple. The man always led, and they always followed. He bought out the whole room every time. During my theater check, I always saw them sitting together in the dark, still and centered, washed in the flickering light of whatever cheap, disgusting horror movie was playing. Then the movie ended, and the man walked out alone, and the theater was empty. I started doing everything I could think of to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I checked the emergency doors constantly, waiting to find out the alarms were broken and some staff member was sneaking people out. The alarms worked perfectly. I tested them myself with a manager watching. They were loud enough to wake the dead. I checked ceiling tiles in the bathroom, thinking maybe someone was climbing up into the space above. It was a tiny restroom with no real access, and even if someone could somehow move a tile, there was nowhere to crawl. No tunnels, no vents big enough, nothing. I asked the cashiers if they saw the girls come in with him. They did. They described them the same way I saw them. Quiet, tired, silent. They remembered selling the tickets. They remembered him buying the whole room with cash. But nobody cared. That's the part that still makes me angry when I think about it. I tried bringing it up to coworkers, and they shrugged. Minimum wage, late nights, long shifts. People just wanted to clock out. A weird customer was just another weird customer. Nobody wanted to talk about the fact that women were walking into a room and not walking out. By the second month, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the small auditorium, empty seats, the man's back as he walked away, and then nothing where the girl should have been. My brain kept trying to fill in the missing moment. It kept running the same question until it felt like it was grinding my thoughts into dust. Where did they go? One Thursday night, I finally cracked. The movie ended. The doors opened. The man walked into the hallway, like always, heading toward the exit. I stepped directly in front of him. I was still holding my broom, not because I planned to use it, but because my hands needed something to grip. My knuckles were white around the handle. "Excuse me, sir," I said. My voice sounded wrong to me, thin and shaky. He stopped. He looked at me. Up close, His face was even more forgettable than it seemed at a distance. His eyes weren't bloodshot or wild or angry. They were flat, dull, like someone had drained out whatever makes people look alive. "Yes?" he asked, perfectly calm. "The girl you came with," I said, and I hated how I stuttered. "Where did she go? I need to lock up that theater." He didn't blink. He didn't look confused. He didn't even look annoyed. The corners of his mouth slowly pulled upward into a smile. It was the most unnatural smile I've ever seen. It didn't match his eyes at all. It looked forced, like a person copying a smile they'd seen in a picture. Like invisible hooks were tugging at the skin on his cheeks. "She already left," he said smoothly. "She didn't like the movie," he added, like that explained everything. "It was too much for her." But I was standing right here, I said, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't see her leave. The fake smile stayed in place. He leaned in slightly, bringing his face closer to mine in a way that made me want to step back, but I couldn't make myself move. "You must have missed her," he whispered. And then, in the same quiet voice, he said, "You should pay closer attention to your surroundings." He stepped around me like I was nothing and walked out into the night. I stood there in the hallway for a long time, trembling. The lobby lights buzzed faintly. The building creaked as it cooled. I felt like I'd pushed my finger into something I didn't understand, and now it knew my name. I knew he had lied. I knew I had not missed her. A person cannot just vanish. By the time I got home that night, I had made a decision that felt stupid and dangerous, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to see what happened with my own eyes. I needed to catch the missing moment that my brain kept trying to imagine. Last Thursday, I called in sick. I told my manager I had a fever. I made my voice sound rough. He didn't question it. People call out all the time. I waited until 10:30 that night and dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans. I kept it simple, like I was trying to disappear. I walked to the theater with my head down, went into the lobby, and used the automated ticket kiosk in the corner. I bought a ticket for a completely different movie playing upstairs. Something normal. Something that would explain why I was there if anyone asked. I passed the box office without stopping. With the hood up, none of my coworkers recognized me. Or if they did, they didn't care. I went up the stairs to the second floor and walked toward the long hallway. Then I hid in the alcove near the restrooms and waited. At exactly 11, the man appeared. He had a new girl with him. She wore a red dress that looked too thin for the weather. Her skin looked pale under the hallway lights. Her eyes weren't focused on anything. She moved slowly, sluggishly, letting him lead her by the arm like she was half asleep. He pushed open the heavy wooden doors to the small auditorium and guided her inside. I waited until the doors swung shut. Then I counted to 30, forcing myself to breathe quietly. My heartbeat felt loud in my ears. When I reached 30, I stepped out of the alcove and walked to the door. I pulled it open just enough to slip inside. The theater was pitch black, except for the screen. The movie was already in full swing, flashing bright reds and whites, screaming and splattering sounds blasting through the speakers. It was another cheap horror film, full of blood and cruelty. The kind of thing that would normally make me roll my eyes. But that night, it felt like the movie was part of the trap. I stayed low in a crouch and moved to the back row. The seats were old and high-backed, perfect for hiding. I slipped into a seat and peeked over the fabric. The man and the girl in the red dress sat in the center of the middle row, exactly like always. I watched them for almost 2 hours. My legs cramped. My neck hurt. My eyes burned from staring without blinking. They didn't talk. They didn't shift. They didn't laugh at the bad acting. They didn't flinch at the gore. They just watched, still as statues. Near the end, the movie's climax hit. The music got louder and more chaotic, like it was trying to force tension into the scene. That's when the man turned his head. Slowly, like he was doing it on purpose, he looked at the girl beside him. He reached out and placed his hand on the back of her neck. She didn't react. No flinch, no pull away, nothing. Then she turned her head to face him, expression blank, and he leaned in and kissed her. At first it looked like a normal kiss, private, intimate, like maybe I'd been wrong about everything and this was just a weird couple doing a weird weekly ritual. Then the light from the screen flashed, and I saw what was wrong. He wrapped both arms around her waist and pulled her tight. But it wasn't a gentle hug. It was a crushing grip, like he was trying to press her into him. And she didn't resist. She didn't push back or struggle or even tense. She just let him hold her as the kiss went on. Then the shape of her body started to fail. I watched the red fabric of her dress press into his dark jacket. But it didn't stop at the surface. It sank into him, like his chest wasn't solid, like it was soft, like it was something that could swallow. Her shoulders caved inward, folding and melting into his collarbones. Her arms flattened where they rested against his sides, then fused into his ribcage as if her skin and bones were turning into part of him. He kept kissing her while her face blurred. Her hair sank into his skin. Her pale cheeks dissolved into his jaw. The red dress faded and vanished, swallowed by the dark fabric of his jacket. It happened fast. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. My brain refused to believe the timing, because it was too quick for something that should be impossible. Then the seat next to him was empty. The man sat alone and took a long, deep breath, his chest expanding like he'd just finished a meal. Then he turned back toward the screen and kept watching the last few minutes of the movie as if nothing had happened. I couldn't move. My mind flat out rejected what my eyes had seen. It felt like reality had split open, and my thoughts were scrambling to tape it back together. Nausea surged up my throat. I swallowed hard, afraid I would make a sound. I knew I had to get out before the movie ended, and the lights came up. I didn't know what he was, but I knew I didn't want to be in the same room with him when he stood up. I slowly rose from the back row, keeping low, and started creeping toward the exit at the top of the aisle. My whole body trembled so hard, it felt like my bones were vibrating. I could barely feel my legs. Then, my heel caught the edge of a carpeted step. I lost my balance and fell forward. My face slammed into the back of the seat in front of me, and my knee hit the floor with a loud crack that echoed through the auditorium. The sound cut through the movie noise like a gunshot. I froze, hands on the floor, breath trapped in my chest. Pain pulsed in my knee and across my cheek, but fear drowned it out. Slowly, I lifted my head and looked down toward the middle row. I expected to see him standing there, staring up at me. The middle row was empty. Not just the seat beside him. All of it. Every seat. No man, no movement. I scanned the theater wildly. The screen kept flashing, lighting up empty chairs in quick bursts. Front rows, empty. Middle empty. Back empty. He was gone. A cold panic shot through me. I scrambled to my feet and rushed to the exit door. All I wanted was the hallway, the lights, the normal building sounds. I grabbed the metal handle. Something small and wet hit my shoulder. I stopped. My hand flew up to my hoodie. My fingers came away slick. In the dim light, I brought them close to my face. Blood, not a smear, a fresh drop, thick and dark. My stomach turned cold. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to shove the door open and sprint, but there's a terrible part of being human that makes you look up when you know you shouldn't. I tilted my head back. The ceiling was high and painted black to stop reflections. It was a blank, dark space. Except it wasn't blank. He was there, pressed flat against it. The man clung to the ceiling like an insect on glass, limbs splayed wide, no visible support, no wires, no grip. He was simply there, defying gravity, watching me. His face pointed straight down. His eyes were glowing, a faint sickly yellow light that made his features clearer than the movie did. The same forced smile stretched across his mouth, but wider now, revealing teeth that were too sharp and far too many. I opened my mouth to scream. Before I could make a sound, he dropped. He fell with terrifying speed and slammed into me, a crushing weight that knocked the air out of my lungs. We crashed into the back row of seats, and he pinned me down against the folded cushion like I was nothing. One of his hands clamped over my mouth and nose, cutting off my air and smothering my scream. His fingers felt like cold iron bars digging into my skin. His other hand pressed hard into my chest, holding me in place. I fought. I kicked. I clawed at his wrist. I twisted and bucked and tried to bite, but it didn't matter. He didn't flinch. It was like struggling against a machine. The harder I tried, the more hopeless it felt. He leaned in close, and the yellow glow of his eyes filled my vision. "I recognize you," he whispered. His voice was low and steady, but it vibrated through my chest like it didn't come from normal vocal cords. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a bug he'd found under a rock. "You are the usher," he said. "You are the boy who sweeps the floors." Tears slid down the sides of my face and soaked into the seat fabric. My lungs burned. My body was already getting weak from lack of air. I had my doubts, he continued, calm as if he was talking about the weather. "A few weeks ago, when you stopped me in the hallway, you asked me where the girl went." He leaned closer, cold radiating from him. "I thought it was coincidence, a trick of the mind. But you sitting here in the dark confirms it." His eyes narrowed. "You remember them," he said, like he was stating a fact, not asking a question. He loosened his hand just enough for me to pull in a ragged breath, but not enough to scream. The air felt like fire in my throat. "When I consume them," he said, "they are gone. Their bodies become mine. And their presence is erased. Families forget them. Friends forget them. Records vanish. The world adjusts as if they never existed." He paused, breathing slowly, as if he enjoyed telling me this. "But you remember the girls," he said softly. "Every week you see them, and every week you remember them. That should not be possible." I stared at him, shaking, too terrified to understand the full meaning of what he was saying. All I understood was that the missing girls weren't missing. They had been eaten and then wiped out of reality. "This means you are a special one," he whispered. The smile slipped, replaced by a hungry look that made my blood run cold. "I have not encountered a special one in a very long time," he said. "I wonder how a special one tastes." He raised his free hand and extended one finger, slow and careful, like a doctor preparing to touch a wound. He brought the fingertip down to my cheek. I squeezed my eyes shut and braced for a scratch or a stab. Instead, he pressed. His finger slid straight through my cheek like my skin was warm water. No resistance at all. The pain was immediate and blinding, a violent burst that shot through my jaw and skull. It felt like a freezing hot needle scraping through nerves. I convulsed, making a horrible muffled sound into his palm. I could feel his finger moving inside my mouth, dragging against my teeth, violating something deep and basic in me, like he was proving he could do it. Then he pulled his finger out. I gasped, choking on air, pain throbbing like a drumbeat in my face. My eyes watered so badly I could barely see. The man stared at his finger. For the first time, his expression changed into something like confusion, then calculation, then sudden fear. Wait, he muttered. He looked back down at me, and the grip on my chest tightened again. If a special one is here, he hissed, voice sharper now, urgent, awake and remembering. Does that mean the hunters are near? I had no idea what he meant. My brain was spinning. Hunters. What hunters? People? Things? I couldn't even focus on the word. He leaned harder onto my chest, crushing my ribs until stars burst behind my eyes. Are you with them? He demanded. Do you work for the hunters? Are they watching this building? The fear in his voice gave me one clean, clear thought. He's scared. Something that could walk on ceilings and swallow people and erase them from existence was scared of something else. And fear, in that moment, was my only weapon. Yes, I forced out, muffled against his hand, but I nodded hard, frantic, trying to make him believe it. Yes, he froze. For a long moment, he just stared at me. The movie ended behind him. The screen shifted to rolling credits, and the room fell into a dim gray glow that made everything look dead and flat. He slowly removed his hand from my mouth. I sucked in air and held it like it might be taken away again. I didn't scream. I didn't call for help. I knew if I made noise, I'd die before anyone reached the door. Listen carefully, he said, and his voice was different now. No fake politeness, no playful menace, just cold, sharp fear. I do not want war with them, he said. Not here. Not now. He eased some weight off my chest, and it felt like my ribs could breathe again. I will make a deal with you, he said quickly. I will not absorb you. I will not kill you. I will leave this city tonight, and I will never return to this building. He pointed at my face with that long, pale finger. But you will tell the hunters you saw nothing, he ordered. You will tell them the trail is cold, that I am not here. His eyes sharpened. If you tell them where I went, if you send them after me, I will find you before they find me, and I will make you beg for me to absorb you. My cheek pulsed with pain. My whole body was soaked in cold sweat. I nodded because nodding was all I could do. Do we have a deal? He asked. Yes, I whispered, voice shaking. Yes. I won't tell them. I promise. He watched me for one last second. Then the yellow glow in his eyes faded until they looked dull again. Almost normal. The forced smile returned, smaller and calm. Good, he said. Then he stood up. In a sudden movement that didn't look human, he launched himself upward. He hit the black ceiling and stuck to it for a split second, then skittered across it like something with too many legs. He reached an air conditioning vent near the front, grabbed the metal grate, and tore it off like it was paper. He slid into the ductwork and disappeared into the dark with a soft, scraping sound. I didn't wait. I stumbled out of the theater, down the long hallway, and out into the night air. I didn't go back to the lobby. I didn't talk to anyone. I left the building like it was on fire. I went straight to my apartment, threw clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed my passport and whatever cash I had, and called a taxi to the airport. I bought the first international ticket available and paid in cash because my hands were shaking too hard to think about anything else. Now I'm sitting in a small room far away from everything I know. My cheek still hurts. When I look in the mirror, there's no scar, no bruise, no mark. My skin looks normal, which somehow makes it worse because it means there's nothing visible to prove it happened. But the pain is there all the time. A steady reminder that it was real and I wasn't dreaming. I promised him I wouldn't tell the hunters. I promised I would say I saw nothing. But I can't carry this by myself. Every time I close my eyes, I see that girl in the red dress folding into him like she was being poured into his body. I see the other girls too, even though I don't know their names, because I'm the one who watched them walk in every week. So I'm writing this here for one reason. This is for the hunters. If you're real, if you exist, if you read boards like this, looking for things that shouldn't be here. I lied to him. He is out there, and he is feeding on girls, and he is erasing them from the world like they never existed. He knows you're looking for him, and he's scared enough to bargain. Please find him. Stop him. And if you can, do it fast. Because if he realizes I broke the deal, he will come back for me. And I don't think there will be a second chance. Story 2. Most mornings I end up back at the lake. I don't make a big decision about it. I don't wake up and tell myself, today I'll go to the lake. It just happens the way habits happen. Shoes on, keys in hand, body moving before the brain catches up. By the time I'm on the path, the air has that early morning chill that feels clean and unfinished, like the day hasn't been touched yet. The benches are always in the same places. The chain barriers stay where they've always been, looping between metal posts to keep people from getting too close to the edge. The lake spreads out in front of everything, calm and distant at the same time, like it's watching back without caring. It's a busy place in the mornings, but never loud. It's full of people who are doing something specific, people who seem to know what they're here for. You've got the hardcore joggers, the ones who look like they were born running, breathing evenly with that focused expression that makes it seem like their thoughts have been turned off. Then you've got the other joggers, the ones who look like maybe, one day, they'll be hardcore too if they just keep showing up long enough. There's a woman I started noticing because she looks out of place in a way that's hard to ignore. Wrong shoes, clothes that don't belong on a trail, no sweat-wicking fabric, no careful ponytail, no smartwatch. But she keeps coming anyway. 8 mornings in a row, always at about the same time. She moves with stubborn determination, like she's trying to prove something to herself more than anyone else. There are also the people who treat the lake like a studio, fitness influencers, couples filming workouts, someone holding a phone up while another person repeats the same jump or the same stretch again and again until it looks effortless. They get annoyed if anyone walks through the background, even though the path isn't theirs. You can see the anger flash across their faces, that quick look that says, "You ruined it," like you stepped into their living room uninvited. There are lovers, too, always. They find a patch of shade behind a tree trunk, close enough to feel hidden, convinced that bark and leaves can keep a secret. People feed the fish near the shallows, tossing small pieces of food and watching the surface ripple and break. Old men argue about football the way they always have, loud enough to sound angry but never actually mad, repeating the same points like tradition. Everyone's here for something, a routine, a distraction, a goal, an excuse. No one comes here just to watch. For a long time, I thought that made me different. I told myself I was the rare kind of person who could simply observe without needing to fill the space with purpose, like I was above it in some small way, like noticing was its own reason. Then I started noticing the bench across the lake. It's one of those heavy concrete benches that look like they've been bolted into the world. It sits on the opposite side, slightly tucked behind some greenery, not really in the best spot. It isn't placed for the view. It feels more like a bench you end up on when you don't feel like walking anymore. The first time I saw him there, it didn't mean anything. Just a man sitting alone, like plenty of people do. The second day, he was there again. Same bench, same side of the lake. My brain filed it away without me trying. Familiar detail, nothing more. By the third day, my route had shifted. Not dramatically. I didn't plan it. I just drifted toward a path I didn't usually take. The one where the trees get taller and denser, where the air feels cooler even when the sun is out. It almost feels like a forest for a few minutes, even though you're still in the middle of everything. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn pushed through the quiet, low and lonely. The kind of sound that always makes you think of places you aren't. That was the day I ended up walking close to the bench I'd been watching from across the water. He was there, still, but not the usual kind of stillness. People sit still all the time, scrolling through their phones or zoning out, lost in thought. This was different. His posture looked deliberate, like it had been chosen carefully, and then held, one hand on his knee, leaning forward slightly, his head angled toward the lake, turned just a little to the left, not fully facing it, as if he was listening for something rather than looking. I slowed down without meaning to. The wind moved across the lake in long strokes, turning the surface into soft ripples. The light made the water look like metal. Maybe it was just the angle. Maybe it was just my imagination warming itself up. Then he looked straight at me. It was sudden, clean, like he'd been waiting for the exact second I would notice. I felt something snap in my chest, a fast, cold jolt. I turned and left. I didn't even see his face. I didn't stay long enough for that. I just walked away too quickly, heart pounding, as if I'd done something wrong by being there at all. That night I told myself it was nothing, that I'd creeped myself out for no reason, that this was what happens when you spend too much time alone with your thoughts. I went to bed and still, at some point in the dark, I pictured the way his head had turned, the way his eyes had found mine like it was easy. The next morning, I ended up back at the lake again. I didn't decide to. I just did it. There's a difference between being curious and being pulled along, and you don't always feel the moment you cross that line. You only realize later that you're no longer choosing. At first, I tried to act normal. I watched everyone else, like I usually did. A group of people kept retaking the same photo near the water, every attempt more staged than the last. They shifted their bodies, changed their smiles, tried different angles, trying to capture something that looked natural while doing everything possible to force it. Nothing around the lake had changed. The joggers passed. The dog walkers moved at their slow, steady pace. The water stayed calm. The chains still kept everyone back, like polite little boundaries. Eventually, without admitting it to myself, I started walking toward that bench. This time, he wasn't alone. Someone sat beside him. From where I stood, she was only a vague outline. A woman leaning slightly toward him, close but not touching. The space between them wasn't filled by a hand on a knee or an arm around a shoulder. It was filled by something quieter, something that doesn't need contact to be there. People sit like that all the time. There was nothing unusual in the pose. But the gap between them bothered me anyway. The familiar kind of gap. The one that isn't distance, but choice. The one that says, this closeness belongs to us, not to you. I moved closer, not because I wanted to interrupt, but because my body kept taking steps as if it had been given an instruction my mind didn't remember hearing. As I approached, I started picking out details. Her shoulder, the angle she leaned, the way her hair fell, straight and still, barely moving even when the wind shifted. And something in me tightened, because it didn't feel new, not exactly familiar in a clear way, like recognizing a face, more like recognizing a feeling. Like the shape of her presence fit into a place in me that had been empty for a long time. Then, without warning, a name rose up in my throat and stopped there, right at the edge of being spoken. It sat behind my teeth like a secret. A memory slid into my mind, quick and bright, as if someone had flicked a light on in a room I hadn't entered in years. A different place. A long line outside a bakery. I could smell warm bread and sugar. I could feel the impatience of people behind me. She stood in front of me, half turned, saying something I can't remember now. The line had stalled, and without thinking, I stepped closer, the way I used to. She leaned back slightly and rested her weight against me like it was the most natural thing in the world. I lowered my head and buried my face in her hair. It smelled faintly sweet, warm, human. The kind of smell that stays in your memory without permission. She didn't move away. The memory slipped out as fast as it arrived, like my mind had only allowed me a taste. On the bench, the man said something I couldn't hear. The woman answered with a small gesture, tilting her head, the kind of movement that says she's listening closely. For a second, it felt like her voice almost reached me anyway, like I could hear it through the air without the words, asking for another story. The way she used to. Not a rehearsed story, not something planned, just something I would make up right there, just for her, and she would shift a little closer when I started talking as if she could pull the words out of me by being near. And I would keep going, even when I ran out of things to say, stretching it longer and longer, because I didn't want the moment to end. I stopped walking. I didn't move any closer. There's a point where moving forward doesn't make anything clearer. It only removes the distance you've been using to protect yourself. It forces you into the truth before you're ready to hold it. The wind rolled across the lake again. Their reflections on the water broke apart, stretched, twisted, and then smoothed back into shape. And in that brief distortion, in that half second where the world looked wrong, I saw it. He was me, not in a metaphorical way, not in a he reminded me of myself way. In the simple, brutal way recognition hits you when there is no room for doubt. The shape of his head, the way he held his shoulders, the posture of his body leaning forward, the exact angle of the hand on his knee. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. My mind tried to fix it by denying it. It offered excuses quickly, desperate ones. Lots of people look similar. Lighting can play tricks. You're tired. You're imagining. But the more I stared, the more solid it became. The woman turned slightly. I caught a glimpse of her face, or maybe only the suggestion of it. Sometimes, you don't need a perfect view to recognize someone. Sometimes you know by what's missing, or by the weight of a presence you didn't realize you'd been searching for until it stands in front of you again. I knew her. The name I had held back slipped out of my mouth quietly, almost without sound. I said it the way you say something sacred, something you're afraid will break if you speak it too loud. I said it the way I had said it before, under these same trees, carried away by the same wind. And in that moment, certainty settled over me like cold water. I wasn't meant to be standing here. I was meant to be on that bench, in his place. I took another step forward, like I could walk into the scene and correct it. Like if I got close enough, the world would recognize the mistake and switch us back. Nothing happened. No reaction. No pause. No glance. They kept talking, their bodies angled toward each other in that quiet way that says no one else is in the room even when a crowd is passing by. It was like I didn't exist in their version of the morning. I understood then that I could walk right up to them. I could stand beside the bench. I could say my own name. It wouldn't matter. I wouldn't belong there. That version of me belonged there. The one sitting on the concrete bench, sharing a space with her that felt practiced and true. I didn't. It was like showing up somewhere seconds after you've already left, when the door is already closed and the room has already moved on without you. My head filled with questions I couldn't answer. How did I get from there to here? What happened in between? Where did the split occur? Was it a choice, a mistake, an accident, or something that had been decided for me long ago? Nothing resolved. No missing memory clicked into place. No explanation arrived. So, I did the only thing I could do. I watched. The wind shifted again. The lake surface flickered. For a moment, the world felt thin, like a page that could tear. Something seemed to crack, just slightly, and then everything snapped back into the normal shape of morning. I stepped away. They didn't notice. Nobody ever notices what sits outside their moment. People move through their own small scenes like they're sealed inside them, and anything that doesn't belong gets filtered out, ignored, erased. I walked home, past the joggers, past the woman in the wrong shoes who kept showing up anyway, past the trees that stood like polite old friends, tall and steady, pretending they hadn't seen anything strange. Everything was the same. That's the hardest part, the way the world refuses to react, the way it stays ordinary even when something impossible has happened right in front of you. The way you still have to stop at crosswalks and wait for cars and nod at strangers, like your life hasn't just quietly broken into two versions. People don't come here to observe. They come to do something, to fill the morning with purpose, to claim a piece of the day. I always thought I was different. It turns out I wasn't. I come here almost every morning now. I don't look for them. I don't need to. I know they're there, across the water, tucked behind the greenery, on that bench that isn't even in a good spot. Some days I can't see them clearly, depending on the light and the leaves and the angle, but I feel where they are like you feel a tooth with your tongue after it aches. Sometimes, when the wind dies and the lake becomes perfectly still, I almost remember what it felt like to belong. Like I still owe her another story I never got to finish, one more made-up thing whispered softly, just to keep her leaning close for a little longer. But it never stays. The reflection fades. The lake ripples again. The bench becomes just a bench. The trees become just trees. And when it does, it's only the lake. And me, still on the outside, still watching. Still trying to understand when observing stopped being a choice and became the only place I was allowed to stand. Story 3. I wasn't ready. I just didn't know it yet when we arrived in that town. I still remember the day my dad got the letter, because it was one of those moments that divides your life into a before and after. We were already struggling in quiet ways. My sister's health, money that never stretched far enough, the tension between my parents that had started to feel permanent. But that letter didn't just add pressure. It cracked something open. Dad read it once, then again, and I watched the color drain from his face as if the paper itself was sucking the life out of him. He'd always carried himself like the world owed him respect, like his job made him untouchable. He wasn't the kind of man who handled embarrassment well, and whatever was written there wasn't just bad news. It was humiliation. They deem me unfit for my position, he said, voice thin at first, like he couldn't believe the words were coming out of his own mouth. Then it broke, and the anger rushed in to fill the space. They are transferring me. He stared at the letter like he wanted to tear it apart with his eyes. Me? Unfit? He slammed his hand on the table so hard the dishes rattled. His palms were cold and sweaty. I could see the tremor in his fingers. I couldn't stand seeing him like that, partly because it scared me, and partly because I knew what it meant for us. When Dad felt cornered, he didn't get quiet. He exploded. Before I could fully process that he'd lost the job he bragged about more than he ever talked about his family, I saw my mother's expression change. She didn't look surprised. She looked furious, and not the kind of anger that burns hot and loud. Hers was sharper, controlled, like a knife you keep hidden until you need it. She looked at him as if the letter was his fault, as if she'd been waiting for proof that he'd finally ruined everything. I warned you, she said, and her voice was shaking, but her face stayed stiff. Tears filled her eyes without softening her. But you would never listen. They don't want us to live happily. They envy you. They envy us. Our content life, our prosperity. It would have sounded dramatic from anyone else. From her, in that moment, it sounded like something she truly believed. Like the world wasn't random, but targeted. Like there were people out there who wanted to crush us because we dared to be okay. My sister tried to speak. She opened her mouth and made a small sound, but her words got caught. Then she started coughing, violent and painful, the kind that bends your body forward like something is trying to pull your lungs out. My mother's panic flared immediately. How will she? My mother started, then stopped, because she couldn't finish the thought. How would my sister continue treatment somewhere else? How would we afford it? How would we even find doctors in whatever place the letter was sending us? I remember standing there thinking that if my mother knew what somewhere else actually meant, she'd collapse. Dad wasn't being transferred to a nearby city or a better facility. He'd been pushed out to a forgotten place, a disconnected town deep in the countryside of Murshidabad, a place most people only knew as a dot on a map, if they knew it at all. Dad didn't even seem to hear my mother. He was too locked into his own wounded pride. He threw the letter down like it was burning him and hit the table again. Then he paced toward the door, muttering to himself, his anger making him clumsy. Something near the entrance, one of those little decorative showpieces people keep by the door, got knocked over and shattered. But he didn't react. It was like he had stopped seeing the house, stopped seeing us. All he could see was what had been taken from him. I couldn't take it. I walked to my room and slid under my blankets like a child, even though I was old enough to know blankets don't protect you from real life. But they had always felt like the closest thing to safety. That night, they didn't. I cried into the pillow and tried to keep the sound inside me, pushing my sobs down until they turned into that quiet shaking you get when you're trying not to be heard. I wiped tears from my cheeks until there were no more, and then another drop would take its place. It was a cycle that made you feel like you'd never be finished crying, like your body had turned into a factory for grief. I wanted everything to go back to normal, back to the way it had been before misery started crawling into every corner of our home. I didn't know our home was already gone. We just hadn't left it yet. We entered the town on a Tuesday at exactly 12 a.m. I remember because I checked my wristwatch the moment our headlights swept across the sign. The name was written in silver letters, neat and almost pretty. Jahil Bari. If you split the words, it meant home of the lake. The name should have sounded peaceful. It didn't. The first thing I noticed was the sky. I'd never seen a night sky like that. So dark it looked thick, like it had weight. Darkness is usually just the absence of light, but this felt like something else. Like the sky itself was deep in a way I couldn't explain, as if it held layers and layers of secrets. The full moon was out, bright enough that it should have softened everything, but the darkness didn't seem to care. It swallowed the moonlight like it was rejecting it, keeping the town wrapped in its own kind of night. I found myself staring up through the taxi window, almost hypnotized by it. My eyes only snapped away when the driver cursed suddenly in a thin, sharp voice. The taxi jerked violently to the left. My mother grabbed my sister. My sister grabbed my mother, and I saw my father's face twist as he fought not to vomit. Panic swept through the car so fast, it felt like a wave. I gripped the door handle so hard my knuckles hurt. My whole body trembled. I tried not to scream. I tried to be the calm one. I wasn't. The tires skidded across the road with a long, horrible screech. We slid farther than we should have, and the car finally stopped with the front bumper less than a meter from a tree trunk. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father threw the door open and vomited onto the side of the road. My mother and sister were still clinging to each other, eyes wide. I stumbled out and dropped to the ground, breathing too fast, like my lungs were forgetting how to work. The night air felt cold and metallic. "What is wrong with you?" Dad shouted at the driver when he could speak again. We could have died. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" The driver didn't answer. He didn't even look at my father. He was staring at the road ahead of us, specifically one exact spot where the car had swerved as if something had been in our way. He wasn't just staring, he was studying it, like he was expecting something to still be there. When I leaned closer to see what he saw, I felt confused because there was nothing. Just gray road, empty, cold, unwelcoming. The kind of road that looks like it doesn't want to be traveled. But the driver's face told a different story. His eyes were full of terror, pure terror, the kind you can't fake and can't hide. It wasn't the fear of an accident. It was the fear of seeing something you weren't meant to see. "Uncle," I said, trying to get him to blink, to react. "Are you okay? What happened?" I even waved a hand in front of his face. Nothing. Then his gaze lifted past the road, toward something across the way. A small lake sat beyond the shoulder, half hidden in the darkness, its surface barely visible. There was a board near it, and in the weak light I could make out the name, Nal Jahil. That name hit me like a memory I didn't want. I'd read articles before we came here, not official travel guides, not anything welcoming, strange stories, rumors. Talk about travelers who saw a woman near that lake. Talk about a couple that went missing after stopping there. I told myself it was nonsense, the kind of story people repeat because they're bored and want to feel scared. But standing near the lake didn't feel like standing near a normal body of water. It felt like standing near a mood. Something heavy lived there. Distrust, hatred, envy. The lake seemed to leak those feelings into the air without trying to hide them. The water was dark, like spilled ink, reflecting the night sky's depth but twisting it into something disturbing. The same darkness that had mesmerized me above now looked wrong below. The driver suddenly slid out of the seat and collapsed onto the ground like his legs had quit. His skin looked pale, the way people look when they've been drained. His lips had a bluish tint. For one terrifying second, I thought he was dead. Dad checked his pulse and swore under his breath. "He's alive," he said, but it sounded like he wasn't sure. I barely had time to focus on the driver before I heard it. A loud swoosh of wind, not the normal kind that moves through trees. This sounded intentional, like the sound effect in a horror movie right before something appears. It made my stomach twist. The strangest part was that the wind wasn't blowing where we stood. The air around us was still. The wind was blowing near the lake, and in that strip of moonlight near the water, I saw her, a young woman sitting on a stone at the edge of the lake. I couldn't see her face. All I could see was her hair. Long, dark, thick hair that moved with the wind like it was underwater. It flowed too smoothly, too gracefully, the way hair moves in dreams. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick, a shadow, a bush, anything. But my body knew better. I felt fear, but not the fear of pain or death. It was the fear of something outside the rules I understood. The fear that whatever I was looking at didn't belong to our world. After that, everything blurred into survival. We dragged the driver back into the taxi. Dad took the wheel because the man couldn't. The only dispensary in town showed up on my father's phone as a pale dot on the map, and the internet connection flickered like it didn't want to help. We found the building eventually, small, pale blue, lifeless looking, with a red cross mounted above it. The place was too quiet for a clinic. No one going in or out. No voices. No sense of night staff or emergency readiness. Just stillness. Dad went inside, and the rest of us waited in the car. After a while, he came back with 2 male nurses and a stretcher. One of them frowned the moment he saw the driver. The other looked at him and said something under his breath that sounded like disbelief before they lifted the driver's limp body. The whole scene felt wrong, like we were all acting in a play where no one had been given the full script. It was past 3 a.m. when the doctor finally spoke to my father. He told him to go home and rest. He said the driver would be watched. He said it in a calm voice that didn't match the reality of a man collapsing in terror on the road. We hadn't even seen our new house yet. Dad drove the taxi to the address on the letter, following the phone directions. He said he'd return the taxi after the driver recovered, as if this was still normal life and not something that had already started to rot. Our house looked like every other townhouse in layout, except it was smaller than the rest, and it hadn't been cared for. No fresh paint, no clean porch. The cream-colored walls were peeling. Dust sat thick on the floor, which had once been beautiful Norwegian wood. There were no stairs, no second floor, just a lonely ground floor like the house didn't want to grow. It didn't look abandoned exactly. It looked resentful, like a place angry at being left behind. My mother took out instant noodles and went into the kitchen to make something quick. We were exhausted and hungry and too shocked to do anything else. I sat on the sofa and tried to make sense of the night. Why did the driver swerve? What did he see? Why did he faint? I kept cycling through the questions until my head hurt. Then the image of the lake and the woman pushed everything else out. The ink-black water, the wind that only touched her hair, the way it felt like the lake wanted something. No, I told myself. She might not have been real. Maybe I'd imagined it because of those articles. Maybe my brain had filled in a shape because I was already scared. But my sister hadn't read those articles. My father sat down beside me. Not to comfort me. Not really. More like he needed a witness for his confusion. I can't. He started, and for once he sounded small. I can't comprehend what is happening. My father is a research scientist. Logic is his religion. Admitting confusion hurt him almost as much as the transfer letter. He gripped the hem of his sweater tight, twisting it the way he does when he's unraveling. It was unusual, he said, speaking fast now, like he could outrun his fear with words. From the inside, it was worse. Not a single soul was talking. No one was listening to me. Can you imagine? A healthcare center, and it's like they're asleep, standing up. Then the two nurses talked to me. They're from Kolkata. The doctor, too. They said their memory feels broken since they got here. They said time works in a funny way. I didn't believe it, but then when I came out, half an hour had passed, and it felt like a couple of minutes. He paused, frowning like he'd lost the thread of his own story. I even forgot what happened to the driver exact. He stopped himself. Never mind, I'll figure this out. I'll do the forest research. I'll get my position again. I am not unfit. He said it twice like a prayer. I am not unfit. My sister sat on the bed, clutching her teddy bear, like it was the only warm thing in the room. She was sweating. Her lips looked pale. Her eyes were too wide. She hadn't said much since we arrived, but I could tell she was scared. She hadn't seen the lake, I thought. So what was she afraid of? I stood up to go talk to her, and that's when my mother screamed. The sound came from the kitchen, sharp and raw, and it shot through the house like it had been waiting in the walls. I ran toward her, and what I saw made my stomach drop. A snake. A wild cobra, thick-bodied and glossy, raised slightly off the floor as it moved, like it owned the place. There was no reason for a cobra to be in the middle of a town. Our house was far from the woods and far from the lake. It shouldn't have been there. My mother backed out of the kitchen so fast she nearly fell. My father grabbed a stick from somewhere and threw it at the snake. It hit, but the snake barely reacted. It kept slithering, calm and deliberate, crossing the room like it had a destination. My father dragged me toward the door and fumbled with the lock, hands shaking so badly he kept missing the keyhole. "I hope I find someone," he muttered, forcing calm into his voice. Who would even be awake this late? Anyway, it can't be helped. Then he pulled on his coat and stepped outside into the night. My mother disappeared into the bathroom, probably shaking. It left me alone with my sister, and I realized this might be the only quiet moment I'd get to ask her what was wrong. She sat upright with a book open in her hands, but she wasn't reading. She was staring at the page like she didn't see it. "What are you reading?" I asked casually, trying to sound like a normal older sibling instead of someone hanging by a thread. She hesitated, pulling the book slightly closer to herself. That hesitation made my chest tighten. "What is it?" I asked. "What is what?" She snapped, pretending to be annoyed. "What are you hiding?" I said softly. "You know." She froze. Then she whispered, "Don't tell anyone. Mom and Dad won't believe me. I won't, I promised, and I meant it." "I saw a lady," she said, and then she buried her face in her teddy bear's chest like she couldn't handle saying it out loud. "A lady." My skin went cold. When the taxi swerved, she continued after a moment, struggling for breath the way she often did. She choked on the words, not just because of her illness, because of fear. "Relax," I said, grabbing a glass of water and helping her drink. "Tell me." "She was standing in front of our taxi," she said. "I think the driver saw her too. That's why he lost control." I couldn't fully believe her, but I also couldn't deny the way everything fit into place. The driver's terror, the sudden swerve, the way the wind had moved only near the water. "How did she look?" I asked, voice quiet. "I don't remember her face," my sister said, "but she had very long, dark hair." Something inside me sank. That was her. Dad came back with a middle-aged security guard who'd been on night duty. The guard had a cold presence, like he carried night around with him. He went inside and took care of the cobra while my father stood back, watching like a man who didn't want to admit he was afraid of something so simple and so impossible at the same time. When the guard came out, my dad tried to introduce himself, trying to regain control through manners. "I'm very grateful to you," Dad started. "It was nice meeting you. My name is..." The guard cut him off without looking at him. "I can't say the same," he said flatly. "It is not nice to meet cowards." Then he walked out into the darkness and disappeared like the night had swallowed him. After that, we were too tired to hold on to fear. We slept almost immediately. The next day, I woke at 11 a.m., feeling strangely refreshed, like my body had been reset. Even stranger, the memories of the previous night felt hazy, like they were slipping away the moment I tried to hold them. It felt like someone had reached into my mind while I slept and smudged the details. "School starts at 12. My mother yelled, "You don't have much time." I went through the motions, washed, dressed, rushed out. The school building was plain white and looked huge compared to most buildings in the town. And that's where I saw her. The girl sitting at the desk in front of me. The moment I noticed her, I got the strange feeling I'd seen her before. Not just her face. Her voice, too, even before she spoke, like my body recognized her in a way my mind hadn't caught up to yet. When she turned, my heart started pounding. She had delicate features, dark brown eyes, and hair that was more brunette than black, tied back with a violet butterfly clip. Something about her presence made me nervous in a way I didn't want to admit. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was attraction mixed with unease, like two feelings fighting for the same space. She smiled and stood up, walking toward me like we were already friends. "Where do you come from?" she asked. "You're new, right?" She held out her hand. Her smile looked warm, but something about it didn't reach her eyes. It was like she was doing what a friendly person is supposed to do, not what she actually felt. Still, I shook her hand. My face warmed immediately, and I hated how obvious it was. I'm from. My mouth went dry. I'm from Kolkata. The bell rang right then, and I assumed it meant lunch. I reached for my lunchbox and realized it was empty. Then I looked around and saw students standing, collecting bags, leaving. School was already over. I sat there, frozen, lunchbox open, embarrassed and confused as people filed out. A few broken pieces of the day floated back to me, bits of a teacher's voice, a chalkboard, laughter somewhere far away. But the hours themselves felt missing. The girl laughed lightly, not cruelly, more like she found my confusion familiar. She put her hand on my shoulder. "Challo," she said. "Time to go. Come on. Get up." She offered me her hand again. Up close, in the depth of her eyes, something struck me so hard I almost pulled away. She looked like the woman I had seen by the lake. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself it was impossible. The woman by the lake was a shadow, a figure, a fear. This was a schoolgirl with a hair clip and a polite voice. I took her hand. Her palm was cold. At the big lime-colored school gate, she stopped and turned to me, and my mind filled with questions I didn't know how to ask. Why was she being so friendly? Why did everyone in class seem to orbit around her? I'd noticed it all day, in the few moments I could remember, how people helped her, listened to her, treated her like she mattered. She was polite back, smiling and calm. Then she said, very casually, "Do you want to come to my home? Right now." It threw me off so much I actually stammered. "Right now?" "Yeah," she said, like it was normal. "I'd really like you to come, but we just met," I said, trying to keep my voice light. She giggled. "Don't assume I invite everyone. I watched you today. You seem nice, and you're new, so it'll help you learn about the town. I want to tell you a lot about Gilbari." I should have asked my parents. A part of me, the part that still had instincts, told me to ask. But I also knew they'd say no. Not out of care, but out of control. And I didn't want to offend her. I didn't want to lose her attention. That thought alone should have worried me, but it didn't. "Okay," I said. "Yeah, I'd like that." We walked down the left path from school. Houses lined the road, with small shops spaced out at uneven intervals. As we walked, I started feeling watched. I couldn't explain it. The feeling had been following me since we arrived in town, like the air itself noticed me. This time I saw proof. A shopkeeper stared at us openly, eyes fixed and unblinking. A group of women gossiping in a corner went quiet as we passed. Heads turned. People stopped what they were doing. It felt like the whole street was tracking our movement. The girl didn't react at all. She walked with a light step, pointing out houses, naming residents like she was giving me a tour. I decided not to mention the stairs. I didn't want to sound paranoid. The sky went gray as we neared her home. One cloud looked like an eye. Another cloud's shape reminded me of the lake, and I forced the thought away. The wind picked up, the same kind of wind I'd heard the night before, but now it sounded like a soft whistle instead of a warning. Her hair moved with it, and she smiled like she enjoyed the feeling. A raindrop landed on the tip of her nose. "Just when I was enjoying it," she said, and then her tone shifted into something oddly serious. "We have to hurry. When the clouds go sad, we need to be inside." "Clouds go sad?" I repeated, but she was already walking faster. Then we reached her home, and I stopped short. It wasn't a normal house. It was the largest single structure in the whole town, a mansion that looked almost out of place, like someone had picked it up from another world and dropped it in the middle of Gilbari. The roof was a deep brown, like chocolate. The exterior walls were silver, polished and clean, and for a moment I felt warmth coming off the building. But it was a strange warmth, the same way her smile was warm, forced, like a performance. The thing that ruined the beauty was the gate. It was crimson, the color of fresh blood, and it had carvings, inscriptions, and pictures of the lake etched into the metal. One line was in Bengali, and I could read it clearly. We will not betray her. A second chance is all we ask for. My mouth went dry. Before I could step back, the door opened and an old man greeted me politely, as if he'd been waiting. His eyes were sagging and tired, but there was something sharp under the tiredness, something that made me feel like he could see through me. Then the girl's mother appeared. She was young enough that mother didn't seem to match, but she carried herself like someone used to being obeyed. Her face was covered in red cloth except for her eyes. Bangles clinked on her wrists as she took my hand and guided me into the living room. She seated me on a sofa, like I was a guest of honor. From the sofa, I could see into the dining area. A big wooden table filled the room. There were children, teenagers, middle-aged men and women, far more people than I expected. A whole large family eating together. The moment my eyes landed on them, their movement slowed. It felt like they all stopped chewing at the same time. And then they stared at me. Not curious stares. Not friendly stares. Their eyes looked hungry, like they were measuring me, like I was a sample they'd been waiting to examine. The feeling was so strong it made my stomach clench. Then I blinked, and they were eating again like nothing happened. My wristwatch said 2:00 p.m. Sit comfortably, the girl's mother said. I'll bring you food. Lemonade, too. It's very humid. The room was cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms, but I nodded and smiled anyway. Because that's what you do when you don't know what else to do. Thunder cracked outside, and rain started falling hard. I hadn't brought an umbrella. The sound made me feel trapped, like the house itself had closed its hand around me. I looked around again and realized the room felt emptier than it should. The people who had been at the table were gone. Not one or two, all of them. The chairs were pushed in neatly, like lunch had ended hours ago. An old wooden clock hung high on the wall. It read 2:45 p.m. That couldn't be right. I'd only been sitting a few minutes. I checked my wristwatch again. 2:05 p.m. My throat tightened. Either the clock was wrong, or my watch was wrong, or my mind was wrong. I couldn't tell which possibility scared me most. Then, someone knocked. A tall man walked in, muscular, around 40, carrying himself like someone who gave orders for a living. One of his eyes was replaced by a white stone, smooth and blank, which made his face look even more intense. He wore a single crimson cloth, like a robe. His real eye locked on me, and his expression shifted into something I couldn't read, disbelief mixed with delight, like he'd found something valuable. The girl's mother hurried him upstairs. The grandfather spoke to him quietly, then glanced at me before following. Relax, the girl said, almost whispering, as if she'd been waiting for me to react. He's just our advisor. She didn't explain what that meant. Before the upstairs door closed, I saw a large framed symbol on the wall, the lake, and a woman sitting on a stone drawn in a distorted, unsettling style. Once I noticed it, I saw it everywhere, carved into objects, engraved into decorations, like the house was marked. On a shelf above the other books sat one ancient, tattered book with yellow pages and a cover that looked damaged by time. The same symbol was drawn on it, rough and forced, like someone had wanted it there, no matter how ugly it looked. Underneath that shelf was a small framed black and white photo of a teenage boy in a turban and traditional clothes. I stood up without thinking and walked closer. My feet moved like I was pulled. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. The boy was me, not similar to me. Not he kind of looks like you. It was my face, my eyes, my expression, like someone had taken a picture of me in a life I didn't remember. When I stepped back, the rain had stopped. I grabbed the chance. I should go, I said quickly. My mom must be worried. It was a lie. My mother wasn't the type to worry in a way that protected me. But I needed an excuse that sounded normal. Wait, at least have snacks, the mother said, appearing beside me with a tray as if she'd been watching me the whole time. I'll come again, I lied, because lying felt safer than saying, I'm scared. I left the mansion with my heart pounding and the photo burned into my brain. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not my parents. Not my sister. I kept it inside like a secret that could poison me if it got out. The rest of that day, my parents fought the way they'd been fighting more and more often, loud and sharp, blaming each other for everything. My sister's health was getting worse. My mother was having nightmares. My father was furious about his job and convinced someone had ruined him on purpose. That night, the argument got so bad I couldn't breathe in the house anymore. I walked out into the street and told myself I didn't care, that I was numb, that I was indifferent. But tears kept coming anyway. I wiped them the way I always did, again and again, as if I could erase what I felt by rubbing my face clean. I wandered the cobbled streets until I saw the girl. I hadn't spoken to her much at school that day. Something in me felt guilty for leaving her house so suddenly. A stupid part of me still wanted her approval, still wanted to be seen by her the way she'd looked at me in class. I walked up and tried to sound casual. Hey, how was math? He gave us so much homework, right? She didn't answer. She was crying. I knelt in front of her, not to impress her, but because she looked like she might fall apart. You can tell me, I said. I'm here. She turned her eyes toward me. They looked darker when she was sad. More honest, almost. She went missing last night, she whispered. My friend. I didn't know until today. I couldn't do anything. I promised we'd finish our project together, and now she's just gone. She swallowed hard. Her parents are waiting, she said, voice breaking. But I know. I didn't push. I didn't offer solutions. I just listened. I know she will know. She started, then stopped because an old man's voice cut through the air. Come here now, her grandfather. He'd been watching from behind her. Before she stood up, she leaned closer and whispered, I have to tell you something. Then she walked away with her head down, and I was left standing there with her words hanging in the air like a threat. I kept walking and found a group of townspeople sitting around a bonfire. The heat drew me in because I was shivering without realizing it. I sat beside a young boy. No one reacted to my presence, like they'd expected me. A girl went missing, I said quietly. Do you know what happened? An older man looked at me over the flames. Have you heard of the Petney? He asked. I shook my head. He began the story like he'd told it many times. A prince once lived in this town, charming and handsome. An ancestor of the big family in the mansion. But behind the charm, the man said, the prince was cruel. He used a girl who loved him, made her do awful things, promised love, then abandoned her when she became inconvenient. The girl was later found in the lake. Now the lake is full of hate, the man said, and inside its black water lives the Petney. She calls people at night. She lures them. She is spiteful. A younger person interrupted, voice heated. That's nonsense. Look at the big family. Everyone has seen their rituals at the lake, chanting. They fear the Petney because their ancestor used a cursed book to call spirits. The missing people, it's their work. As he spoke, something inside my head clicked, like pieces sliding into place. The lake, the symbol, the mansion gate, the photo of me, the girl's cold hand, the way time slipped. I stood up so fast the boy beside me flinched. I started running toward the mansion, but as I ran, my thoughts began to fall apart. At first it was small, forgetting why I'd stood up, then forgetting where I was going. Then, like a rope snapping, I forgot my own name. The world blurred and rearranged itself, streets turning unfamiliar, shadows stretching wrong. My body kept moving even as my mind lost its grip, like something was guiding me without letting me understand. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat, gasping. For a moment I thought it had all been a nightmare. The snake, the lake woman, the town stories. But the fear in my chest felt too real, and my room felt wrong, like it had shifted. My memory was fading even as I tried to hold it, like sand slipping through fingers. My sense of time was broken too. I checked the clock and realized it was night, and somehow I had slept for an entire day, 24 hours gone in a blink, and the lake was in my head, not as an image, as a pull. I was convinced, in a way I can't justify now, that the Petney had called me, that she wanted something back, that she was going to take what the big family had stolen, and I was part of it. So I went to the lake. The night air felt thick. The path there felt familiar, like I'd walked it in another life. When I reached the water, I saw them all. The big family was gathered there, every member, standing in a circle. The girl was there too, but behind the others, her face pale in the moonlight. The wind moved across the lake in that same unnatural way. I pushed through the crowd until I reached her. "What is going on?" I asked, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Her eyes filled with tears. "Stay back," she whispered urgently. "Go away. They want you for the ritual." I was luring you for the ritual the whole time. I stood there, frozen. Then she said, almost like a confession she couldn't hold inside anymore, "But I feel bad. I like you. I fell for you when you listened to me. Nobody listens to me." Before I could speak, her grandfather grabbed both of us and dragged us forward. The circle tightened. The chanting rose. The lake surface looked too smooth, like glass holding back something hungry. And then she appeared. The woman from the lake. Her presence changed the air. It felt like all warmth was pulled out of the world. Her voice echoed across the water, but I couldn't hear the full words clearly, like the sound was breaking inside my skull. "Give me." That's the last thing I remember. I was found injured near the lake the next morning. People said the big family was gone, every one of them missing, including the girl. They said it was punishment for conspiring against the Petney. They said the lake had claimed what was owed. After that, my sister died. At her funeral, I thought I saw the girl again, but not as herself. She wore traditional clothes. Her hair was dark, darker than before, and for a second she looked exactly like the Petney. Then, when I blinked, she was gone. Or maybe she was never there. The mansion changed too, or my memory of it did. When I tried to go back later, there were no symbols, no carved gates, no photo of me. It was like the house had been scrubbed clean of the things that proved what I'd seen. Like the town itself was correcting reality. My parents divorced not long after. Everything that had held our family together broke apart quietly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but separate lives and old bitterness. I kept seeing her after that, sometimes in reflections, sometimes in crowds where no one else noticed, sometimes in dreams that felt more real than waking. I tried to explain it away. Trauma, grief, stress, sleep deprivation. I went to a psychiatrist because I didn't know what else to do, and because the people around me started treating me like I was fragile glass. But she didn't go away. Even now, she's here. Her forehead rests against mine. Her hair brushes my cheeks, and it smells like lake water and rain. My body is tired in a way that feels peaceful, like giving up is finally easy. The metal of the knife is cool against my skin, a strange relief compared to the fake warmth people have offered me for years without ever understanding what happened in that town. Blood sits still on the white marble, calm and bright. My consciousness is slipping. The room is getting soft around the edges, and I hate how grateful I feel that the last face I'll ever see is hers. She is beautiful. And I don't know if that's love, or a curse that learned how to sound like love, or simply the final trick of a lake that never lets go of what it has noticed. Story 4. Tom died 10 years ago, but I just realized he might still be alive. I'm standing in the smokehouse right now with my hands on the edge of a trapdoor, staring down into a hole that shouldn't exist. It's black down there, the kind of black that doesn't look empty, just deep, like it's full of air that never sees light. I keep waiting for a face to appear at the bottom of the steps, a pale shape tilting upward into my phone's flashlight beam. I really want that to happen. Because if someone comes up, I can stay up here. I can ask questions from a safe distance. I can keep one hand on the trapdoor and slam it shut if I have to. But if nobody comes up, then I don't have a choice. I have to go down. I have to know if he's been living under here all these years. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Anything to buy him time to show his face. Anything to delay the moment I have to put my foot on the first step and commit. We were both 13 the year Tom died. That part is true. That part has never changed. What's changed is what I'm willing to believe about it. That year was already a mess before Tom entered my life. My dad, Lars, decided our family was going to move across the country so he could become a Civil War reenactor. Not as a hobby, not as a weekend thing. He wanted it to be our whole life. It'll be a great adventure, he told us. He said it like a promise, like one of those lines dads say when they expect everyone to clap and smile. My mom, Maggie, didn't clap. She didn't smile much either. She was the kind of person who learned to be careful around my dad's moods, so she stayed soft and agreeable in public. In private, I could see her skepticism in the tightness of her mouth, but she still went along with him the way she always did. Plus, she told me once, while she paid for a manicure for both of us like it was a treat that could fix our whole relationship, it'll be nice having your father around more. I avoided her eyes because we both knew it wasn't true. My dad being around more didn't mean family dinners and board games. It meant more chances for his temper to land on someone. And when it landed on me, my mom had a habit of disappearing. She'd slip into their bedroom, shut the door, and lock it like she could lock out reality. I tried to talk them out of the move. I begged, really. I wanted to stay in Los Angeles. I wanted my friends, my school, the normal life I understood. I wanted to spend weekends at the mall and after school at Sephora with my friends, testing glittery stuff we couldn't afford and pretending we were older than we were. I wanted to be a kid in a city full of kids. Nobody cared what I wanted. So we moved, and we didn't even move into a house. We moved into a trailer at the reenactors' camp, like we were joining some traveling circus that happened to worship the year 1863. What I remember most is the heat. Not just heat, but heavy heat, muggy heat. The kind that makes your clothes stick to your skin the moment you step outside. The kind that makes the air feel thick and alive with bugs. The trailer's air conditioning barely worked, and half the time it blew warm air anyway. At night, I'd lie in bed sweating and listening to the camp sounds, voices, laughter, The occasional crack of a musket being cleaned, someone's boots scraping gravel, and I'd feel like I'd been dropped into the wrong timeline. If you don't know how reenacting works, here's the basic layout, at least at that camp. The men got the fun parts. They sat around the fire, talked big, polished their guns, acted like the world belonged to them. Every so often a bugle would blare, and they'd march out into a field to shoot muskets and pretend it was history. The boys helped them, carrying gear, copying the men's voices, learning how to be the same kind of loud. The women sat in rocking chairs on the big porch of the main house, sewing or gossiping, looking like they were in a postcard. And the girls did the work nobody wanted. My job was sweeping the smokehouse. I hated it. I hated sweeping. I hated the smell of smoke that soaked into my hair and clothes. The smokehouse was a small building with no real windows. It had vents near the ceiling, but even those felt useless. Smoke had a way of lingering, clinging to the walls like a memory. There was a fire pit in the floor, and along one wall there were barrels and tools. Above me, in the rafters, were hanging slabs of preserved pork. Every kind of meat, dark and heavy, swinging slightly when I moved beneath them. All day long, I worked with dead meat hanging over my head. Sometimes, standing there with the broom, I'd catch myself wishing a heavy piece would drop and knock me out. Not even kill me, necessarily, just make everything stop for a while. When I complained to my mom, she acted like I was being dramatic. "Be grateful you don't have to deal with the flies," she said, like that was supposed to be comforting. I wanted to tell her we should trade. I wanted to tell her she could sit in the smokehouse for one day and sweep while the air burned her lungs, and I'd sit on the porch in a rocking chair looking pretty. I wanted to say a lot of things. But I didn't. I was a good girl. That's what my parents liked to call me when I behaved. And I learned early that if I forgot to be a good girl, my dad had ways of reminding me. He believed in punishment like it was a form of education. My mom believed in it too, in a quiet way. Afterwards, she'd patch me up with bandages and say gently, "Punishment helps you remember." So I learned to keep my mouth shut. One afternoon, with sweat soaking through my period blouse and sticking to my developing chest, I saw Tom. He was out in the field by himself, away from the men and their smoke and laughter. He was kicking at the grass and muttering to himself. Every so often, he'd pick up a stick and throw it as far as he could, like he was trying to throw his anger away. Something about him pulled at me, maybe because he was alone. Maybe because I was alone, too, in my own way. I thought about leaving him alone. Then, I walked over. He didn't look at me when I got close. He didn't tell me to go away. He kept kicking at the grass. I picked up a stick and threw it. It landed somewhere in the weeds. I expected him to laugh at me or ignore me. Instead, he picked up another stick and threw it too. Then another. We didn't talk much at first. We didn't have to. We walked and threw sticks and let silence do the work. After a while, that became a pattern. We started spending time together whenever we could, slipping away from the camp like we were sneaking out of our own lives. My dad hated it. He didn't say it outright at first, but I could tell. He'd watch me when I left. He'd ask too many questions when I came back. He'd slam cabinets and doors like he was trying to shake the trailer apart. My mom tried to convince him it was fine, that Tom was just a friend. My dad would snarl and then slam his hand on the table hard enough to make everything jump. One night he did worse. He grabbed my arm so hard I saw stars and yanked me close. "Don't spend time alone with him," he warned. His voice was low, controlled, and full of something that made my stomach turn. "Good little girls don't do that," he added. The next day, my arm hurt so badly it throbbed even when I didn't move it. Within hours, I ended up in a cast. The details of how are blurred the way traumatic things can blur. What I remember is my dad's calm face afterward. and my mom's gentle hands wrapping gauze, and the words she always used like a lullaby. Punishment helps you remember. The cast didn't stop me from seeing Tom. If anything, it made me more stubborn. 13-year-old love is like that. It doesn't feel like a crush. It feels like oxygen. It becomes the only thing that matters. I was in love, and I didn't even know him that well. I didn't understand how stupid that was until much later. I started trying harder in the ways 13-year-olds know how. I wore berry lip gloss until my lips looked permanently wet. I washed my hair with floral drugstore shampoo that smelled like lilacs and sugar, even though it attracted flies like I was carrying candy in my pockets. Everyone else at camp used harsh soap and smelled like peppermint and dirt. I didn't care. I wanted to smell like a girl who belonged somewhere else. My dad noticed and mocked me. "You look drunk," he sneered once, staring at my shiny lips like they offended him personally. I kept doing it anyway. Tom's mom, Carol, seemed to think it was sweet that Tom and I were close. She went out of her way to be kind to me. Once she even baked cookies with me, and for a little while it felt like what a normal home might feel like. Flour on hands, warmth in the kitchen, someone speaking to me like I wasn't a problem. Then, Tom's dad, Harlan, walked in. The whole mood changed. His eyes narrowed the moment he saw me. He didn't say anything, but his stare made my skin go tight. I mumbled an excuse and left quickly, forgetting my cookies. One early evening, when the air was still sticky hot and dinner was about an hour away, Tom and I went down to the lake to cool off. My cast had just come off. I remember touching my bare arm like it was new, like I didn't trust it yet. We sat on the edge of the water with our feet in the lake. We talked about nothing important. I swatted at flies and kept sneaking glances at Tom's face, waiting for him to look at me in a way that would confirm everything I felt. I wanted him to kiss me. I kept waiting, pouting my glossy lips, leaning a little closer, finding excuses to touch his hand. He didn't make a move, he just kept talking. Maybe he's shy, I told myself. Maybe he's waiting for the right moment. While he was mid-sentence, I finally got brave. I leaned over and kissed him. He went stiff. He blushed so hard his whole neck turned red, like he'd been burned. Then, instead of kissing me back, he started talking fast, stumbling over words, and what came out of him made no sense at all. He started talking about the smokehouse, about a trapdoor in the floor. It was like he'd been holding it in for a long time, and my kiss had triggered it, like a button. A confused heat crawled over my skin. I didn't want to hear about the smokehouse. I wanted romance. I wanted him to want me. I forced myself to ask, voice tight, "Do you want to kiss me back?" Tom looked down. His face was still red. He swallowed. Then he shook his head no. That simple motion hit me like a slap. My cheeks burned with shame. I didn't even say goodbye. I scrambled to my feet and ran, leaving him sitting there with his feet in the water like I'd never existed. I never saw him again. That night, when I got back to the trailer, my dad was furious that I'd been off with Tom. My mom tried to calm him down, but they fought for hours. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to their voices rise and fall. Then, suddenly, it got quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when my mom gives in. The next morning, my dad told me I was going to my grandmother's house, several hours away. He acted like it was a normal decision, like we were just visiting family. "You're spending too much time with Tom," he said as he shut the taxi door. I almost told him he had nothing to worry about. I almost told him Tom didn't want me, so there was nothing to punish. But the idea of speaking to my father at all made my stomach twist. So I said nothing and watched the camp disappear behind me. A few days later, my parents showed up at my grandmother's house. My dad told me Tom was dead and that we were going back to Los Angeles. Accidentally shot himself, my dad said when I asked how. He said it like he was reading a news headline. My mom sat beside him with her head bowed and her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. We didn't want you spending too much time alone with him, my dad went on. But this, I'm so sorry. And then my dad cried, real tears sliding down his face. That shocked me more than the words. I didn't know monsters could cry. It was my first real brush with death. I didn't know how to act. I forced myself to cry because that felt expected, but mostly I felt confused. The more I thought about Tom, the more I realized that for all my obsession, I barely knew him. I didn't even know his favorite food. I didn't know what he was afraid of. I didn't know why he'd been so upset that first day in the field. Then, he was gone, and the camp was gone, and we were back in Los Angeles as if it had all been a strange fever dream. 2 years after Tom's death, I heard there would be a memorial at camp. Apparently, there had been one the year before, and no one had told me. I asked to go. My parents surprised me by agreeing, eventually. They told me it might help with my behavioral issues. By then, my dad was traveling for work again, and each time he came home, the meanness looked deeper, like it was carved into his face. My mom looked worn down, gray hairs showing at her temples. She called my attitude disrespectful, and she wasn't wrong, but I was tired of being good. When I asked about the memorial, my dad exploded. He broke a chair in anger and stormed out. When he came back, he was calm in a way that frightened me more than yelling. He told me I could go, but when I returned, he expected a reset. He wanted his good little girl back. That was the first time I saw the message. At camp, I avoided the smokehouse. It held too many memories. I also tried to hug Carol, thinking she might appreciate it. She looked at me like I'd insulted her. Her kindness from before was gone. Her face was hard, her eyes cold. She turned away, and it hit me that she was just another adult who could switch off empathy like a light. When the blue shuttle came to take me to the airport, I felt a weird pull, like something tugging me toward the smokehouse despite myself. At the last moment, I walked over and pushed the door open. Inside, long drapes covered the high vents, blocking the airflow. The air felt stale and trapped. There was a smashed clock on the bench, its face cracked, like it had been hit with something. When I stepped closer, I saw the bench was covered in snipped locks of hair. Just piles of hair, dark and light, mixed together. I stared, skin prickling, and then I saw a small slip of yellowed paper on the bench. I picked it up and read it. I will never forgive you for leaving me. My stomach dropped. It had to be a prank, or some messed up memorial tradition. Tom was dead. But the note felt personal in a way that made my chest tighten. The shuttle honked outside, impatient. I shoved the paper back down and left. By the time I got back to Los Angeles, the note blurred into the rest of the confusion of that time, and I told myself it had meant nothing. The next year, when the memorial came around again, I wanted to go. I'd done well on my pre-PSATs, and my parents were suddenly obsessed with colleges and scholarships like they were lifeboats. My dad still lost his temper when I asked. I threatened him with the only thing I thought he cared about. I said I wouldn't go to college unless he let me go. After days of yelling, tears, and my dad threatening my mom with divorce for not siding with him, he caved. That year, I did something I still feel sick admitting, even now. While I was at camp for the memorial, I hooked up with Harlan. I know how that sounds. I know. I'm not proud of it. I'm not defending it. I was young and angry and lonely and desperate for someone to want me in a way that felt powerful. Harlan was older, and he knew exactly how to talk to a girl like me. We talked about Tom, and about Carol falling apart after his death, and about my dad's cruelty and my mom's weakness, and how unloved I felt. It felt like confession. It felt like being seen. Then he leaned in close and whispered, "I love that you're a virgin." I wasn't, but almost no one knew that, so I pretended. I let him have that fantasy, because I wanted something from him too, even if I didn't know what it was. Because of everything that happened with Harlan, I almost forgot the smokehouse. I only remembered when the blue shuttle showed up again. I loaded my bags, then ran to the smokehouse at the last second. The curtains still hung over the vents. The smashed clock was still there. The locks of hair had been woven into an ugly wreath and placed on the bench. There was less meat hanging from the rafters than last time, like the place was slowly emptying out. The old note was still on the bench, and next to it, there was a new note on the same yellowed paper. "You abandoned me when I needed you most. Why didn't you save me? T." I stared at it too long, heart beating hard. It didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like an accusation that had been waiting for me. But the shuttle was waiting, and the driver was impatient, and I ran back out. The following year was the worst fight yet. My parents wanted me focused on the PSATs, and they found an email Harlan wrote me and got suspicious. I swore up and down they were twisting things, that it was nothing. They didn't believe me. So I went anyway. I stole money for airfare. I told them I was staying with a friend. I flew to camp without permission, sick with worry about what would happen when I got home. The fear made my stomach cramp so badly I could barely eat. That visit was a blur of bad choices. I slept with Harlan too much, like I was trying to drown my thoughts. I got caught more than once by other reenactors. I kept expecting Carol to confront me. She gave me looks that made my skin crawl, like she knew everything, but she never said a word. With all that drama, I forgot the smokehouse until I was already in the shuttle on the way to the airport. I forced the driver to pull over. I told everyone I had to see something before I left, and I jumped out. I wanted to see the smokehouse. I also wanted to see Harlan one more time, and I did that first, then went to the smokehouse with him. He explained, almost casually, that the curtains over the vents, the broken clock, the hair wreath, those were ways some people mourned the dead during the Civil War. He said it like it was history trivia, like it wasn't horrifying to see in a small, dark building that smelled like old smoke. We walked in together. Harlan got to the bench before I did. There was another note on yellow paper. He picked it up, read it, and the color drained from his face. He tore the note up and swore under his breath. Then he stormed out without even looking at me, without a final goodbye, without any explanation. He left the torn pieces on the floor. I crouched down and picked them up, hands shaking, and I managed to piece it together enough to read it. "I died because of you. Your mistake. Your fault. T." I stood there staring, and for the first time I let myself think the crazy thought all the way through. What if Tom wasn't dead? Or what if someone knew something about his death that they were hiding? I carried that thought back to Los Angeles like a hot stone in my stomach. But then my dad came home, and things got ugly, and my mom said her gentle words while she drove me to the ER. Punishment helps you remember. The next year, my senior year of high school, I didn't make it to the memorial. Harlan barely emailed. I heard there was some new pretty thing at camp, and jealousy made me sick. That was when my body dysmorphia started, when I began to feel like my own skin didn't fit right. I made more mistakes. I hooked up with my neighbor's dad, and it was a disaster in a way I can barely describe. I knew it was wrong. But I didn't stop. I didn't stop until it was too late, and he whispered, "I love that you're a virgin," and I realized it was the same line, the same pattern, the same sickness, just a different man. My parents found out and blamed me, of course. They said I seduced him. The fight was brutal. I ended up on crutches. Permanently grounded, didn't even cover it. So I studied. I crushed my SAT retake. I went to Wesleyan that fall. My body dysmorphia got worse, but I got better at hiding it. College kept me busy enough that Tom became a sealed box in my mind, something I didn't open. Years passed. Therapy happened. I graduated. And on the 10th anniversary of Tom's death, I came back to camp for the memorial. I was working a terrible minimum wage job and spending what little money I had on therapy. I told myself I was going back for closure, but I think I just wanted to see if the smokehouse still existed in the same way it did in my memory. That year at the memorial, I confronted Harlan. I told him he was sick for touching me when I was young and vulnerable. He sniveled. He said he'd never done anything like that with anyone else. He pointed out I had been of legal consenting age when it started. He blamed loneliness. He blamed Carol for shutting him out after Tom's death. He acted like his behavior was something that happened to him, not something he chose. I didn't forgive him. Not really. I just got tired. I got high with another reenactor and tried to float away from my own thoughts. Then, with no rush for once, I went to the smokehouse. Everything was still there, except the meat. The rafters were empty now, bare wood instead of hanging pork. The air smelled different too, less like smoke and more like cool, stale earth. With the vents covered by curtains, it made sense that the fire pit couldn't have been used in a long time. The whole building felt sealed. On the bench, there were more notes than I had ever seen before. Several of them. All yellowed paper, like someone was using the same old stash, or the same ritual. I picked one up. It was angrier than the others. The handwriting looked firmer, too, more certain, and it was signed with a full name. "I hope you burn in hell for what you did to me. You walked away from me, abandoned me, let me die, then went on living your life, having your fun. I know what you did, and you will pay. Tom." My first thought was that Carol had written it. It made the most sense, in a twisted way, a grieving mother writing in her dead son's voice, punishing herself and everyone around her. Tom was dead. He had to be dead. Still, I stood there, holding that note, and something cold slid through me. Because even if Carol was writing it, it meant she blamed someone. It meant she believed Tom's death wasn't an accident. That was the first time in 10 years I remembered what Tom had said at the lake, right after I kissed him and he turned red and panicked. The smokehouse. A trapdoor. I'd been so humiliated that day, so focused on my own shame, that I never asked him what he meant. I never looked. Now, I did. I pushed the barrels out of the way. They scraped across the floor with a dull, heavy sound, and dust puffed up around them. Underneath, there was a metal handle set into a square outline in the wooden floor. A trapdoor. My throat went dry. A thought hit me so hard I had to grip the bench to steady myself. What if Tom had been down there? What if he hadn't shot himself? What if he had been trapped? Hidden? No, it was impossible. A decade is too long. No one survives under a floor for 10 years. But the handle was real under my fingers. I pulled it. The trapdoor lifted smoothly, almost silently. It didn't creak at all. It felt well-oiled, like someone had been opening it, like it hadn't been stuck shut for years. I leaned over and looked down. Steps led into darkness. The air that drifted up from below was cool, almost pleasant, like a basement on a hot day. It smelled clean, too, not like rot. That part made my stomach drop, because rot is what I expected if nobody had been down there in years. I swallowed hard. Tom, I called out. My voice sounded stupid in the empty smokehouse, thin and young. Silence. Then, somewhere in the dark, I heard a shuffle. My whole body jolted. Every hair on my arms lifted. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. It's a rat, I told myself. A possum. An animal. Not Tom. Tom. I called again, louder, and my voice cracked. From below, a raspy voice shouted back, "Go away, I actually peed myself." It wasn't a little. It was hot and sudden, soaking my underwear. My legs went weak with shock. Was that Tom? My hands shook so badly I fumbled for my phone. I dropped it. It landed in the wet spot on my shorts. I grabbed it, wiped it on my shirt, swiped at the screen 3 times before the flashlight finally turned on, and I aimed the light down the steps. The beam only reached so far. It lit the first few steps and then dissolved into black. "Who's there?" I shouted. "Identify yourself, go away." The voice shouted back, deeper this time, forced and harsh, like it hurt to speak. I should have slammed the trapdoor and run, but I couldn't. Not after 10 years. Not after those notes. Not after the feeling that something under this building had been waiting for me. I didn't want to go down there. My whole body screamed no. But I had to know. I had to see who was speaking to me from the dark. "I'm not going away," I yelled louder than I meant to. It came out more confident than I felt. My mouth tasted bitter. I smelled like pee. "Tell me who you are or I'm coming down." No response. And now I'd made it worse, because if it was someone dangerous, I'd just announced myself. And if it was Tom, if by some impossible horror it was Tom, I couldn't leave him down there and pretend I'd never heard that voice. That's when I started typing this. That's why this post exists. It's not for attention. It's not for drama. It's because I needed a record. Something that proves I didn't imagine this if I don't make it back out of the smokehouse. I kept hoping whoever was down there would change their mind and come up. But nobody did. The air stayed cool. The trapdoor stayed open. The dark stayed dark. So I finally said it. "I'm coming down." My voice shook on the last word. I put one foot on the first step. The temperature changed immediately, cool and steady like an underground room that never sees sunlight. It felt good, which made it terrifying, because it meant this space was stable. It meant it wasn't just a hole full of spiders and mold. It felt lived in. I took another step. My flashlight showed only a small circle at a time. I moved the beam slowly, scanning. At the bottom, I saw a small landing. A table with a candle. A thin mattress on the floor. Enough space that someone could move around. The air smelled almost normal, like dust and old wood, and something faintly soapy. There was a corridor, too, stretching away into the dark like the basement was bigger than the smokehouse itself. I stared at it and felt my skin go tight. "Don't make me chase you," I yelled, trying to sound braver than I was. "I will find you. Show yourself." Something shuffled in the corridor. My heart jumped so hard I felt sick. The beam of my light shook as I aimed it toward the sound. A figure moved in the dark and began walking toward me. Slow, careful steps. The outline looked hunched, as if whoever it was had spent too much time down here and forgotten what it felt like to stand tall. I lifted the flashlight higher, breath trapped in my throat, and aimed it at the face as it came closer. I screamed, not because it was Tom, because it wasn't. "Dad?" I whispered, voice breaking. I couldn't make the words sound real. It felt like I was hallucinating. My lungs tightened, like the air had thinned. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me for a long moment without answering, and in that moment I saw my childhood in his face. Not love, not worry, just control, like he was deciding what version of the truth to hand me. Visiting Tom, he said quietly. The words didn't fit together. My brain tried to reject them. Wait, I whispered. He's alive? My throat was so dry it hurt to speak. He's alive? My dad stayed quiet long enough that I thought he might not answer. Then he said, very calmly, he's buried here. I like being with him. I stared at him, a pounding building behind my eyes. My dad liked being with Tom, under the smokehouse, in a hidden room. I swallowed hard, and suddenly a piece of the past clicked into place so sharply it made me dizzy. I had an affair with Carol many years ago, he said, voice low. For a few seconds, the sentence didn't mean anything. The words floated in the air like a foreign language. Then my brain translated it, and the meaning hit me like a heavy door swinging open. Tom was my half-brother. My knees went weak. I dropped into a crouch without meaning to, like my body needed to get lower to survive the weight of it. So many things rearranged inside my head at once. Tom's nervousness, Carol's kindness turning to cruelty, Harlan's stare, my dad's obsession with keeping me away from Tom. It all shifted into a new shape. And then another thought arrived, sudden and clear, and it was so awful it felt like a living thing in my chest. My dad killed Tom. Tom found out about the affair. Tom threatened him. Tom told someone. And my dad made him disappear. I forced myself to breathe through the panic. I needed proof. I needed him to confess. Not for justice. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about police or courts. I was thinking about survival. Confessions are leverage. Confessions are anchors in reality. I reminded myself of something I'd told myself 1,000 times in therapy and never fully believed until that instant. You promised to be brave. You promised not to be scared of him. I lifted my phone again and aimed the light at his face, trying to study him the way you study someone who's about to lie. Did you? My voice fell apart. I swallowed and tried again. Did you kill Tom? He bit his lip and slowly shook his head. That small motion sent a flash of memory through me. Tom at the lake, red-faced, shaking his head no after I asked him to kiss me back. My dad swallowed hard. His eyes flicked away, then back, like he was choosing his next words carefully. Your mother always said punishment helps you remember, he began softly.